Extra values, what they mean, how to use them. So there are 4 core values in my ebook, Best in the World, Why I Am, How You Can Be Too. It's made up of four core values. And there is one core value that's a hidden core value, and that is generosity. So in these earlier videos, I've mentioned it a few times. In later videos, I will mention it less and less. So these are some extra values even on top of that. That's the hidden core value. That's core value 5. There are some other things that are important too. One of those is compassion. So in the root word, and this is going to touch on leadership psychology as well. In the root word, passion means suffer, and calm means with. So compassion is to suffer with. And it sounds silly, but another word for that is empathy. Empathy means to feel into the emotions of another person. So you are, that's the difference between sympathy and empathy. You don't have to necessarily, you just feel with the emotions. You don't necessarily attach yourself to the emotions that are being felt, is the difference. With sympathy, you get, someone is sad, you comfort them, you get sad with them just to comfort them, and that would be sympathy. And that's, you only do that with certain people that you trust very well. But with everyone else, you can still have empathy, or what some people call compassion. And here's the reason why. John Maxwell, as you will soon discover, is another iconic legend as far as I'm concerned in the leadership psychology, and one of his principles is the herding principle. And what that means is that most people are only hurting you because they themselves feel hurt inside. That's the pain principle by John Maxwell. And it exactly comes into compassion here, because everyone is dealing with problems that you know nothing about. Everyone is dealing with problems that you know nothing about. And those problems being hidden is not a bad thing. Dale Carnegie said we should let other people save face. What he meant by that was letting other people conceal the emotions that they want to conceal and be forthcoming about the things they desire to be forthcoming about. So fear is not very different from an assumption. It's really difficult to have one without the other. That's what I'm trying to say. It's difficult to have one without the other. Fear causes you to assume, and assuming causes you to develop a deep-seated fear that you don't really even know is there most of the time, because your mirage of a personal truth, or what John would call the lens principle, who you are determines how you view other people. And ultimately, self-development is a lifelong journey. It's not something that you just get there one day. Now, I also mentioned power of perspective in some of the other videos. And power of perspective, nonetheless, all problems are self-generated. So blaming other people, basically any problem is not attached to the problem out in 3D world. It's attached to the problem in your endocrine triune, wherever your consciousness is happening. I personally believe that your consciousness is happening in your endocrine triune, which is in the brain. So I could just say brain, but for real quick, it's made up of the pineal, and then the pituitary stalk is made of the hypothalamus and pituitary. And these three glands in the brain are the only endocrine glands in the brain. The rest of them are throughout the body. You've got a couple in the throat, a couple right here. You got the pancreas, the adrenaline, and then if you're a dude, then your testes are actually part of the endocrine system. And if you're a lady, then it's in the ovaries, and those are also part of the whole endocrine system. It's important to understand that. So, and it's all controlled by the pituitary stalk in the back of the brain. Anyway, where that consciousness is happening doesn't matter as much, but somewhere in the brain is where your thoughts happen. And your thoughts are what create an electromagnetic field around you. An electromagnetic field around you is created, and here's the thing. Gosh, if I had a diagram, I could just make one up, I guess. There's this thing called the electromagnetic spectrum, and any modern scientist would have been taught the electromagnetic spectrum. I'm pretty sure it's in the public school system. Very young age these days. Very young age. So basically, here's the line. It's measured in frequency. I don't remember exactly what frequency. There's somewhere around there. This is visible light in the middle. Visible light. 1 second. Okay, back at you. So, X-rays, radio waves, gamma waves, ultraviolet, you got microwaves, infrared waves, and in the middle, like less than 1% or about 1% or so or less, okay, is visible light. And you and I, what we see on a daily basis, I just really got to drive this point home, because not enough people really understand it. They think they do and they've heard of it before, but they don't really understand it. I want you to really understand it. Please really understand the fact that visible light is only 1% or less of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And you're creating that. You're also creating light that's outside of the visible light spectrum, is my theory. I mean, there's actually magnetism is something that you can see somewhere on this scale through an image, just like an X-ray. Like an X-ray, you can basically see through your skin with an X-ray. And there's some other measuring devices that can actually record the frequency of electromagnetism coming out of you. These are otherwise called auras or something. Anyway, changing your thoughts is how to do it. And a belief is like 100 thoughts. A belief is like 100 thoughts. And a value is like 100 beliefs. A value is like 100 beliefs. So that's why values are important, because if you instill a new value, then it means that you're instilling 1,000, 10,000 thoughts, new thoughts to think, of greater accuracy, of greater precision, of greater relaxed nature. The same thing that makes a phone work is the same thing that makes the water cycle. Think about that. Your smartphone, your cell phone, is operating under natural laws of the natural universe. The water cycle is operating under those same laws. Both of them are caused by sun. And all energy on Earth is created by the sun. Even our petroleum automobiles, even our petroleum burning automobiles are burning energy that originally came from the sun. There's this swampland where for hundreds of years trees would live, grow, die, grow, die, grow, die, and all of the nutrients that had been held in the tree during its life was decomposed. And it's just like creating coal or diamonds or something underground. It just takes heat and pressure. So after so many millions of years, there's enough layers that there's enough weight or pressure, and it goes deep enough into the earth that there's enough heat, and it creates the oil and the natural gas and the coal and everything else is created with heat and pressure underground. But it's not underground for a year or two. It's not like a pine tree that's ready in what, 10 years, 12 years? It's not like an oak tree that takes 60 years. No, instead, the oil that's being combusted in my engine hundreds of millions of years. And we are burning through it so quick it's gonna run out. What are we gonna do? I just watched WALL-E last night, that movie about the robot WALL-E and the Eve probe, extraterrestrial vegetation evaluation. All light, when you turn on your radio in your automobile, that's what makes your radio work. It's called light or electromagnetism. And it's also being emitted from your brain by way of the thoughts that you think, which are based on the beliefs that you have. And what we'll talk about later on is the fact that consciously speaking, conscious is where the thoughts are at, and subconscious is where the beliefs are at. That's why subconscious beliefs is in your ebook. Because changing a subconscious belief is like your autopilot or your robot, or that part of you that is going on by itself is in your subconscious. So if you rely on only changing your thoughts, that's a powerful thing, but changing your beliefs applies Pareto optimality, and frankly, that's what I'm all about. Making better decisions, aligning with Pareto optimality, having selective awareness to be kept not in extreme, but in moderation. What I'm talking about here is selective awareness, okay? So I do want you to increase your awareness. You should always be looking for ways to become more aware. Some ways of doing that are through yoga or meditation. And it's important to understand that reading, for you, the reason I promote that, because that increases your awareness in a way that makes it actually applicable to other people in the real world. If you don't have your increased awareness in a tangible format for verbalization, then it doesn't mean as much to other people in the relationships around you. Having selective awareness. We all do this a little bit. There's 3 layers of truth: personal, objective, and average. We all do this a little bit. Personal truth, or what John Maxwell would call the lens principle, is selective awareness. And we all do this a little bit. Who you are determines how you view others. But specifically, think about friends. They say that you're the average of the 5 people you associate most with. And this is something that parents will oftentimes tell their children when they're in something like high school or maybe even later on in college. They'll tell their children, be careful who you associate with. And association is a very powerful force. And socially speaking, peer pressure is a real thing. It'll never go away completely. And that's what the social dilemma is all about. To be kept in extreme but not in moderation. I'm sorry, not in extreme but in moderation. Moderate selective awareness. Moderate selective awareness. That means that you want to branch closer and closer to the objective truth and further from your personal truth and closer to the objective truth. Daily routines, flowing momentum, build a trigger into your work each day. This is the book I was talking about in one of the other videos, called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. And he explains that flow state, because as I mentioned before, my concept of flowing momentum is based on 2 earlier concepts, one of them being Flow by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, the other of which being The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. The 2 of these make up my personal exploration into the science of flow. And one thing, I suppose you could say that flow was the bigger idea that studied masses of people from a distance in a very psychologist way, whereas I am learning, or the art of learning is a very narrowed in, you could say. He's like an outlier that Malcolm Gladwell would say you look for the outlier, and he's absolutely great. So, taking these 2 perspectives, he has a chapter called Build a Trigger. Build a Trigger. What do I mean by build a trigger? I mean, that was his definition. I don't exactly define it the exact same way. I just think that having good habits and routines can get you into flow. And I guess that's kind of what he's talking about. See, he had a flow because he did Tai Chi Chuan as a competition. I also do Tai Chi. I don't do it as a competition in any way. I just do it, kind of like some people do Hatha yoga, but I do Tai Chi and I call it yoga because it really is when you get down to the bare essentials. And daily routines, flowing momentum, build a trigger into your work each day. Something that gets you flowing momentum, something that puts you in flow state. And flow state is defined as an irregular passage of time. Hours can seem as minutes, minutes can seem as hours. That's okay. That's what you want. If I'm making these videos right, then you're probably experiencing some flow just from watching them. And that's okay. That's a good thing. Some of those videos out there not quite so great. I'm not going to point fingers. Not quite so great. With a new perspective, talking on the power of perspective again, all problem solving behavior is a labor of love. All problem solving behavior is labor of love, which brings us back to compassion. Because if you understand that people who hurt you only do it because they themselves are hurting inside, and that's a principle I've had to take to heart recently in the last 48 hours or so. Some personal stuff had happened where I just knew. I was like, this person is obviously hurting inside. Otherwise, why would they say or do such hurtful things to me? Anyway, compassion, power of perspective. You're probably going to hear more about that in your ebook. You simply cannot help someone who will not help him or herself. All you can do is wish them well. All right, this is going to be a 2-part. 2 parts this week. Congratulations. Part 1 is over. Part 2 begins.